Sexuality, relationships, parental conflicts. These are just a few issues that have teens calling helplines looking for advice. But in 2016 alone, Naseeha, a helpline specifically for Muslim youth, saw its call volume increase by 300%. So think about that for a moment, 300%. Many of those calls, by the way, coming from south of the border, from the U.S. Joining me this morning is Naseeha's Vice President of Education and Outreach, Sumayyah Poonah. Good morning, Sumayyah. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us. It's such a privilege to be part of the show.
Let's talk about how this organization got started. So take me back to the inception.
Right. So it started just as a bunch of university students who wanted to offer confidential support for young people trying to sort of navigate their course in a North American context.
And how much has it grown since 2006?
So it's grown exponentially over the past year, but since 2006, between 2006 to 2008, we were just sort of trying to stabilize our infrastructure and make sure that we met the provincial guidelines and that, you know, legally our bases were covered and that the support that we were offering was the best possible.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about, I mentioned when I introduced you that you're getting calls not only from Canadians,
Absolutely.
but really all over the world.
Right.
So what have been sort of, in context, what have been the differences with the issues of these youth calling from Canada versus elsewhere in the world?
Right. So I think that in Canada specifically, youth are encouraged to sort of be more liberal with the way that they're thinking and be sort of, they're encouraged, right, to sort of explore different aspects of their identity, as well as I think that they're more comfortable with embracing this sort of very pluralistic approach to identity. And that's okay, right? Like,
and that's why it's there.
Yes,
to make it okay
sure.
to have these
Absolutely.
conversations. And these conversations aren't 3 minutes long.
No.
I understand. I mean, the average is what?
Right. So in 2015, our average call time was about 27 minutes. And then in 2016, that sort of rose to about 54 minutes in length.
54 minutes?
Yes.
And what do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to more complex issues being discussed, to deeper solutions sort of being put in place, like life plans and like strategies like breathing techniques, and talking about, you know, more substantial coping skills.
Let's talk about numbers, the numbers of calls. I just want to make sure that I get the numbers
Sure.
correct. 4,000 calls in 2015.
Yes, that's right.
Increased to 16,000 calls in 2016.
Correct.
Does this have anything to do with what's going on south of the border?
I mean, it's hard to sort of make that conclusion, but I do think that it does factor into the spiking calls, just because I can't attribute it to anything else at this point. We never actively engaged in marketing in the States. All of the outreach that we had tried to position ourselves was central to the GTA, essentially. And so what happened was a lot of people were Googling us, and we were the first names that kind of was populated. And it was free access to everyone, and we tried our level best to answer every phone call.
Yeah, I would suspect that's quite challenging.
It
so
is,
how do you operate with, I mean, you know, the people that you have going right
Yes.
now with the amount of calls you're getting?
Right. So, I mean, it was a real challenge to adjust operationally because we had never been set up to handle that call volume. It started out as, you know, a grassroots movement that was based on peer counseling, and so our model was based on numbers between 1,000 to 4,000 annually, and they could have been very inconsistent throughout the history. And then what happened was we had to very quickly make sure that those call lines were manned by multiple counselors and that we could train our counselors in a timely manner, because it takes time, right, to get the quality and consistency in place.
And I know it's a confidential phone call that you make. However, if there is something that comes up, under what parameters would somebody on the other end have to report anything?
Right. So if it's a crisis-related call, we would automatically conference call in a crisis helpline or 911.
Somebody's in danger,
Absolutely,
being hurt, that sort
or
of thing.
hurting themselves, or if there's an issue of domestic abuse, or if there's harm that's being reported, that's beyond our scope, and so we would have to triage that off right away.
What sort of calls are you getting? I mean, what are
So
these teens
we're getting calls, that run the spectrum from as far as LGBTQ to relationship disputes, to molestation, to self-harm, to addictions and
why was
drug abuse.
Why was it important to have a faith-based helpline?
So I think that it's important to sort of be able to assess all of the contributing factors to someone's sort of behavioral makeup. And I think that this is just sort of a base level of trust that's established. And then what we do is we try to hand them off to more qualified professionals in the field. And so that's why we're cultivating relationships with people at CAMH and working with Kids Help Phone in terms of making sure that our counselors are adequately trained. And
so it's a wonderful organization that clearly is popular, and it's a needed resource, that's for sure. Sumayyah, we appreciate you being here today. We'll have more information.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We'll have more information on our website, yourmorning.ca.